In front of her parents, the alien princess pointed at me and said, "I want him." The banquet hall smelled like burnt copper and something sweet that had no name in any human language. Lieutenant Cole Harris stood at the far end of the reception line with his dress uniform feeling 2 sizes too tight, his jaw aching from holding a polite smile for the last 40 minutes, and a half-empty glass of whatever the Vahari called ceremonial wine sweating through his white glove. He had not asked to be here. He had asked to go home. He had filed the request in triplicate. His commanding officer, Colonel Drayson, had laughed so hard he nearly choked on his coffee, then told Cole to iron his dress blues and stop complaining. The Vahari summit did not happen every decade. It happened once in a generation, and Earth had been invited for the first time since first contact 11 years ago. Every member of the diplomatic delegation had been carefully selected. Linguists, xenobiologists, trade economists, 2 former senators, a retired admiral, and apparently Cole Harris, 29 years old, born in Raleigh, North Carolina, who had the singular qualification of once pulling a Vahari science probe out of a decaying orbit using nothing but a beat-up salvage tug and a cable that was never rated for that kind of tension. The Vahari remembered things like that. They kept records the way other civilizations kept oxygen, treating every fact as something too precious to let escape. So here he was. The hall was enormous in a way that architectural photographs never fully communicated. The ceiling was a dome of pale amber crystal, and through it you could see the twin moons of Vahari Prime turning slowly in a violet sky. The floor was dark stone veined with something luminescent that pulsed every few seconds, not unlike a heartbeat. Around the edges of the hall, tall Vahari nobles stood in their layered ceremonial wraps, their 4-fingered hands folded, their wide silver eyes tracking every human in the room with the particular intensity of a species that had decided, after considerable internal debate, that humans were interesting. Cole was doing his best not to be interesting. He had positioned himself near a decorative column, slightly behind the cluster of economists and the retired admiral, and he had perfected the expression of a man who was quietly, professionally present and absolutely not available for conversation. It had worked for the first 30 minutes. Then the admiral wandered away to discuss tonnage ratios with a Vahari shipwright, and the economists got absorbed into a subsection debate about dilithium tariffs, and Cole found himself exposed and alone and very conspicuous in his pressed uniform next to a decorative pillar that was shaped, he now realized, like a coiled animal of some kind. He looked at his glass, he looked at the door, he calculated the distance. He did not make it. "You are the one," said a voice to his left. He turned. She was standing 3 feet away, and he had not heard her approach, which was impressive given that the hall had very little ambient noise. She was tall, slightly taller than him, with the characteristic Vahari bone structure, which meant a face that was angular in places no human face was angular, with high flat cheekbones and a brow ridge that caught the amber light and held it. Her eyes were silver like the others, but with a darker ring around the iris that he had not seen on any of the other Vahari in the room. Her ceremonial wrap was deep blue, almost black, and it moved when she was still, like fabric remembering wind. On either side of her head, above the ears, were the twin crest marks of high house nobility, which meant she was not a diplomat or an aide. She was someone whose opinion mattered. Cole straightened without meaning to. Old reflex. "I might be," he said carefully, "depends on which one." She tilted her head at an angle that Vahari xenobehaviorists had told the delegation meant either amusement or serious evaluation, and that it was usually both. "The one who saved the probe," she said. "Vessel designation Keth 7, 11 years ago. You used a tow cable rated for 4,000 kilograms on an object massing 6,200. "The margin of error was acceptable," Cole said. "The cable snapped," she said. "After the probe was in stable orbit," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, not rudely, thoughtfully, like someone reading a document that was shorter than expected but denser than anticipated. "I am Sarah," she said, "Sarah Valendras Keth." The Keth house. He knew that name from the briefing files. Everyone in the delegation knew that name. The Keth were one of the 5 founding houses of the Vahari Conclave, the ones who had built the original observatory that first detected the radio signatures from Earth 60 years ago. The probe he had saved, Keth 7, had been one of theirs. The name was not a coincidence. Nothing in Vahari society was a coincidence. "Cole Harris," he said, "Lieutenant, Earth Salvage and Rescue Division." "I know," she said, "I have read your file." He almost asked which parts, but he suspected the answer was all of it, and he was not sure he wanted to have that conversation in a room full of diplomats and Vahari nobility. "You did not want to come here," she said. "It was not a question." "I go where I'm sent," he said. "That is not an answer." "No," he agreed, "it is not." She looked at him again with that same thoughtful attention, and then she turned and looked across the room toward the elevated platform at the far end where her parents stood. He followed her gaze. The Lord and Lady Valendras Keth, heads of the Keth noble house, both in elaborate ceremonial wraps, both watching the diplomatic exchange with the composed attention of people who had attended 1,000 events like this and expected to attend 1,000 more. They were watching their daughter. And their daughter was standing next to a human salvage lieutenant. Cole felt the specific discomfort of a man who has wandered into a situation without a map. Sarah turned back to him. "Will you walk with me?" she asked. "There is a viewing gallery above. The ceremony does not begin for 20 minutes, and standing still in formal wear is tedious regardless of species." He glanced toward where the Admiral had gone and found no reason to refuse. "Sure," he said, "lead the way." She did, and he followed. And he did not know yet that the next 3 minutes were going to change his life more completely than the previous 29 years combined. The gallery was a narrow balcony that ran the inner circumference of the dome, accessible by a staircase behind the column where Cole had been standing. The view from up there was extraordinary. You could see the entire hall spread below, and above you the amber crystal caught the last light of the Vahari sun and scattered it into colors that had no proper names in English. Cole gripped the railing and looked out and forgot, briefly, to be uncomfortable. "It is beautiful," Sarah said. "Yeah," he said, "just that." They stood there for a moment in a silence that was, surprisingly, not awkward. Then she said, "I asked my parents about you before the summit. My father said humans were unpredictable. My mother said they were reckless. I said I thought they were brave." Cole turned to look at her. "What changed your mind?" "Nothing," she said. "I still think they are brave." She paused. "I think you are brave." Below them, the hall was filling with more attendees. The ceremony would begin soon. Cole could see the Admiral gesturing broadly at someone in Vahari naval uniform, which was either going very well or very badly. He could see the economists still clustered together, probably safe in their subsection debate. He could see the Lord and Lady Keth, still on their platform. Still watching. And then Sarah turned from the railing and looked down at her parents, and without any preamble or warning, she raised her hand and pointed. Directly at Cole, and in a voice that was quiet but carried perfectly in the acoustic geometry of the amber dome, she said, "I want him." The hall did not go silent, but the portion of it nearest the platform did. Lord Keth looked up toward the gallery with an expression that Cole could not read from this distance. Lady Keth looked at her husband, then she looked back up at her daughter, then slowly she looked at Cole. Cole stood very still. He had survived a cable snap at low orbit. He had once navigated a salvage tug through a debris field with no functional radar. He had talked a panicking ensign through a decompression event by speaking calmly and clearly for 11 minutes straight. None of that had prepared him for this. Sarah lowered her hand and looked at him. Her expression was calm, composed, the way someone looks when they have said exactly what they meant. "What," Cole said, "does that mean?" "In our tradition," she said, It means I have chosen you as my formal consort for the summit proceedings. It is a statement of intention. It does not obligate you. But it obligated your parents. Yes, she said. And every noble in that room. Yes. To do what exactly? She considered the question with what appeared to be genuine care. To take you seriously, she said finally. Cole looked down at the hall. Lord Keth had descended from the platform and was moving toward the staircase. Your father is coming up here, Cole said. Yes, Sarah said. He will want to meet you properly. Cole breathed in, breathed out. He thought about the cable that had snapped, the probe that had been saved, the 11 years of paperwork and salvage runs and dress uniforms that had led, by a path he could not have predicted, to this exact balcony in this exact moment. Okay, he said. That was when everything began. Lord Eshin Valandris Keth reached the gallery in under 90 seconds, which told Cole two things. The man was in excellent physical condition for someone who appeared to be in his mid-hundreds by Vahari reckoning, and he had moved with deliberate urgency. The second one was more important. He was not a small man. The Vahari, as a species, tended toward height and an angular leanness, and Lord Keth had both in full measure. He was taller than Sarah by several inches, which put him solidly above Cole, and his ceremonial wrap was the deep crimson of his house with gold threading that caught the light with every movement. His silver eyes landed on Cole with the immediate, assessing focus of someone who had spent decades making judgments that mattered. Cole stood straight. Old habit, older instinct. When you do not know what is coming, you stand straight. Lord Keth looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Sarah. Then he spoke in Vahari, and it was too fast and too formal for Cole's limited language training to follow more than one word in 5. Sarah answered calmly in the same register, and gestured toward Cole with an open hand. Lord Keth looked back at Cole. He switched to standard, which the Vahari called the trading tongue, spoken with precision, and a very slight resonance in the lower registers that Cole's eardrums felt more than heard. You are Cole Harris, he said. Yes, sir, Cole said. My daughter has made a statement of intention. You understand what this means. She explained the basic outline, Cole said. I have some questions about the details. Lord Keth was quiet for a moment. Sarah, beside Cole, did not move. Below them the hall was beginning to organize itself for the ceremony, streams of Vahari nobles and human diplomats sorting themselves into formal rows. Sarah has not made a statement of intention before, Lord Keth said. He said it the way a man states a fact rather than the way a man makes an argument. She is 34 years by Vahari count. In human years, the conversion is approximately 27. She has attended 46 formal summits and diplomatic events. She has never done this. I believe you, Cole said. It is not a point of pride, Lord Keth said. It is relevant context. She is not impulsive. When she acts from a position of considerable thought. Cole turned to look at Sarah. She met his eyes without apology. How long, he said, have you been thinking about this? Since I read your file, she said. When did you read my file? 4 months ago, she said, when the summit invitation list was finalized. Cole turned back to Lord Keth. The older Vahari was watching this exchange with a careful neutrality that was itself a kind of information. What does the statement of intention actually require, Cole said, in practical terms, for the summit proceedings? Lord Keth clasped his four-fingered hands together. You will be seated beside her at all formal events. You will be introduced as her chosen companion. You will have access to House Keth's private diplomatic channels during the summit. Vahari of High House will extend you the courtesy and protections of our family for the duration of your stay on Vahari Prime. Cole processed this, and what does it require from me? Lord Keth looked at him with an expression that was not quite surprise but was adjacent to it. Nothing obligatory, he said. As Sarah told you, you may decline. The statement was hers, not yours. If you choose not to accept the companion designation, she will not be dishonored. She will simply be on record as having chosen someone who declined." "And how often does that happen?" Cole asked. Lord Keth did not answer immediately, which was its own answer. "I see," Cole said. From below, a tone rang through the hall. Low, resonant, vibrating in the crystal of the dome, 3 seconds of it fading slowly. The ceremony was starting. Lady Keth appeared at the top of the staircase. She was shorter than her husband, broader in the shoulder, with the kind of composure that did not look practiced because it had long since become structural. She looked at Cole first, before looking at her daughter, which told him she had already formed an opinion and was checking it against the reality. "He is smaller than I expected," she said to Sarah. "He saved the Keth 7 probe," Sarah said, "with a cable rated for 4,000 kilograms." "I know what he did," Lady Keth said, and there was something in her voice that was not dismissal. She looked at Cole directly. "What do you know about the Vahari formal pairing traditions?" "Almost nothing," Cole said. She nodded as if this was the correct answer. "Honesty. Good." She looked at her husband. Some communication passed between them without words, the specific fluency of 2 people who have known each other long enough that language is sometimes redundant. Lord Keth looked back at Cole. "The ceremony begins in 4 minutes," he said. "If you choose to accept the companion designation, you will walk with Sarah to the formal seating. If you decline, you will return to the human delegation row. Either choice is permitted." Cole looked at Sarah. She was looking back at him with the same composed attention she had offered from the beginning, and in it he saw something that was not pressure. It was simply expectation, the expectation of someone who had thought carefully about something, and was now waiting to see if reality matched the thought. He thought about the cable, 4,000 kilograms of rated tension on a 6,200 kilogram object. Every calculation said it should not have worked. He had done it anyway, because the alternative was watching the probe burn up, and his read of the situation was that the margin of error was acceptable, even if it did not look that way on paper. "Tell me one thing," he said to Sarah. "Yes," she said. "Why me specifically? Not the admiral, not the delegation lead, not anyone else on the list. Why the salvage lieutenant who had one good day 11 years ago?" She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, it was with the deliberateness of someone choosing words that had been already chosen and were simply waiting. "Because everyone else on the list," she said, "would have let the probe burn." The second tone rang through the hall, 2 seconds, softer. Cole straightened his jacket. He looked at Lord Keth, who was watching him with something that was cautiously, guardedly approaching respect. He looked at Lady Keth, who had not changed her expression but whose eyes had shifted in a way that suggested the opinion she had formed was being revised. "I have a lot of questions," Cole said. "You will have time for them," Lord Keth said. "All right," Cole said. He looked at Sarah. "Lead the way." She did. And the hall below, when they descended and took their places in the formal seating arrangement, noticed. The human diplomats noticed. The Vahari nobles noticed. The admiral, Cole saw with a sideways glance, was staring at him with an expression that cycled through confusion, surprise, and something that might have been awe, before landing on a careful blankness that was itself a kind of respect. Cole sat beside Sarah in the front row of the formal seating, with the amber dome above them and the twin moons turning in the violet sky, and he thought that of all the things he had expected when Colonel Drayson had told him to iron his dress blues, this had not been anywhere on the list. But then, the margin of error had been acceptable before. He decided to trust that it was acceptable now. The ceremony began, and Cole Harris, salvage lieutenant from Raleigh, North Carolina, sat in the seat that no human had ever sat in before, next to the Vahari princess who had chosen him in front of her parents and 400 witnesses, and he kept his spine straight and his expression calm and his hands loose in his lap. He was going to need every bit of that training in the days ahead. There were people in that hall who were not happy about what had just happened. He had already clocked 3 of them from the corner of his eye. And the summit had barely started. The ceremony moved through its formal stages, and Cole used each stage to observe. This was something salvage work had trained into him without his realizing it at the time. When you are in a new environment, you inventory it. You note the exits, the load-bearing structures, the systems that look stable and the ones that are quietly under strain. You do not wait until you need the information to collect it. The Amber Hall was full of information. The man in the second row to the right, the one he would later learn was named Verath, had shifted his attention since the seating arrangement was formalized. He was no longer watching Cole with flat, fixed regard. He was watching Lord Keth. Cole did not know enough about Vahari face reading to interpret this with confidence, but he had spent enough time dealing with difficult people to recognize the look of someone running through options. The woman in the Earth delegation, Director Marsh, had put her tablet away. She was watching the ceremony now, her face composed, but once every few minutes her eyes came to the front row, and each time they came there they stayed a beat longer than the time before. The third person he had clocked was still the most interesting. He had identified her during the walk from the gallery to the floor seating, a brief moment when the formal procession paused, and he had the chance to look at the room without looking like he was looking. She was in the Vahari Observer section, which was different from the Delegate section, which meant she was attending in an unofficial capacity. Her house colors were amber and silver, which was 2 houses combined, which the briefing materials had mentioned was a recent arrangement between House Ambar and House Selvi. She had been watching Sarah with an expression that was not hostile, not exactly. It was analytical, the way an engineer looks at a structure that has just changed its load distribution. He filed all 3 away and returned to the ceremony. By the midpoint of the formal proceedings, Cole had worked out that the acoustic design of the hall was deliberate in a way that went beyond aesthetics. The amber crystal dome was not just decorative, it was an amplifier. A specific speaker in a specific position on the floor could be heard clearly anywhere in the room, which meant the hall was designed for transparency. Everything said in a formal register in this room was intended to be heard by everyone present. The statement Sarah had made from the gallery, pointing at him in front of her parents and the assembled delegates, had not been a spontaneous act of personal expression. It had been a public declaration, in a room designed to carry public declarations. She had known exactly what she was doing, and she had done it anyway. He thought about that for a while, watching the ceremony continue, feeling the ambient weight of 400 pairs of eyes occasionally redirecting to the front row. When the musical interlude began, Sarah leaned toward him again. Her voice was low and steady, a commentary built around the quiet spaces in the composition. "The melody you are hearing," she said, "is a record of the founding compact. Each house has a phrase, they are woven together. You cannot extract one without unraveling the whole." "How many houses?" Cole asked. "Originally 11, she said. 5 remain in the founding compact. The others merged or dissolved over 3 centuries. House Ambar is one of the 5. "Yes," she said. "And House Keth?" "Yes." "And they are usually allied." She was quiet for exactly 1 beat. "They are usually in productive relationship," she said. Cole noted the distinction, but not always. "No," she said, "not always." The melody continued. Cole listened to it differently now, trying to pick out the individual phrases without knowing which was which. He could not do it. The weaving was too complete. "Sarah," he said quietly, in the next pause of the composition. "Yes," she said. "The woman in the observer section. Amber and silver house colors. Who is she?" A pause barely perceptible. "Her name is Thessa Verath Selvi," she said. "She is Verath's older sister." "She came with him." "She is his advisor," Sarah said. "Where Verath is methodical, Thessa is strategic. She is the more significant concern." Cole considered this. He had been watching the wrong sibling. "Thank you," he said. "You asked the right question," she said. The interlude ended. The ceremony continued. Cole shifted slightly in the formal seat, adjusting his posture for the long haul, and began thinking about Thessa Verath Selvi with the same focused attention he gave to every new variable in a situation. He was going to need to understand her before she understood him. In his experience, that window was shorter than people expected. On his left, Sarah sat with the ease of someone who had been attending these ceremonies since childhood, her attention on the proceedings, her presence beside him steady and specific, and he was aware of it in the way you are aware of a fixed point when everything else is in motion. He did not examine this too carefully, not yet. There was a ceremony to get through first. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, when the hall began to release into the post-ceremony flow, Cole stood and straightened his jacket and took a quiet breath of the copper and sweetness air that he was already beginning to think of as the smell of this place. And he oriented himself to the room the way a navigator orients to a new chart. Known positions: Lord Keth, Lady Keth, Director Marsh, Verath, Thessa Verath Selvi. Unknown positions: everyone else and what they intended. The reception followed in the East Hall. Cole walked beside Sarah, behind her parents, through the connecting corridor, and the cortege of House Keth moved through the diplomatic traffic with the particular gravity of people who knew exactly where they were going and expected the path to clear. It largely did. Cole noted who stepped back easily and who stepped back with a fraction of a second's delay. That fraction of a second was where the real map was drawn. He kept walking. He kept noting. The East Hall opened before them and the night was beginning, and there was so much more of it still to come. The formal ceremony lasted 3 hours, which was 40 minutes longer than the briefing document had suggested, and during every minute of it Cole was acutely aware of the weight of attention focused on the front row. Not all of it was hostile. Some of it was simply curious, the particular curiosity of a species that had decided humans were interesting, and was now revising its estimate upward in specific and uncomfortable ways. The hostile attention was the more actionable concern. He had identified them during the first hour. The first was a Vahari noble in amber house colors who sat 2 rows back on the right side and had not stopped looking at Cole since the ceremony began, not with the evaluating interest of Lord Keth or the reassessing attention of Lady Keth. With the kind of fixed, flat regard that Cole had last seen on the face of a pirate crew captain right before his crew attempted to board a salvage tug that was, to their considerable surprise, not as undefended as it looked. The second was a younger Vahari, high house by his crest marks, seated in the diplomatic observer section and whispering with considerable urgency into the ear of an aide who kept nodding. The aide kept glancing at Sarah. The third was the most interesting. She was human, which Cole had not expected. She was seated in the Earth delegation section, in the 3rd row, wearing the gray and blue uniform of the diplomatic corps, and she was looking at Cole with an expression that he could only describe as professional displeasure. She was making notes on a small tablet. She had been making notes since the second tone rang. He filed all 3 away and returned his attention to the ceremony. The Vahari conclave opening ritual was, as best Cole could follow it without translation, a formal accounting of what the conclave had stewarded during the previous generation. Resources managed, disputes resolved, treaties honored. It was read aloud by a senior conclave official in the formal register of Vahari that Cole's briefing materials had described as ceremonially archaic, largely unintelligible without specialist training, which was accurate. He caught one word in 8. Sarah beside him translated in a low murmur without being asked. Not everything, just the key points. A trade agreement renewal. A border dispute in the outer systems resolved. A new observatory station, dedicated. Her voice was even and quiet, and she did not make a performance of the translation, which he appreciated. "Thank you," he murmured at one point between passages. You needed it, she said, simply, like noting a fact. How did you know I would need it? Your briefing materials covered Vahari trade language, she said, not formal conclave register. The gap is significant. He glanced at her. You read our briefing materials. I wrote 3 of the sections. He turned to look at her more fully. She was watching the ceremony with the composed attention of someone who had been to 46 of these and could follow the formal register easily. Which sections? He asked. Historical context, first contact protocols, and Vahari kinship traditions. He thought about this. The kinship traditions section, he said, that was the one Colonel Drayson told us to read twice. Yes, she said. It was very thorough. I wanted it to be useful, she said, and there was something at the edge of that statement that he did not fully parse until later. The ceremony continued. During a musical interlude which was haunting and structured around a scale that had no equivalent in Western music, Sarah leaned slightly toward him and said, "The man in amber house colors," 2 rows back. "I see him," Cole said. "His name is Verath. He is the second son of House Ambar, which is one of the 5 founding houses. He is also the person who, until 4 months ago, was the most likely formal companion for a Keth representative at this summit." Cole looked at the ceremony and did not look at Verath. "You said the companion designation doesn't obligate me." "It does not. But it does take something from him." "Status," she said. "Standing. The opportunity to align House Ambar more closely with House Keth. He will not act directly, it is not done, but he will act." "What does that mean in practical terms?" "It means," she said, "that the next several days will require you to navigate situations that you were not briefed on, in a political environment you do not fully understand, while being watched by people who are hoping you will make an error." The musical interlude ended. Cole settled his hands in his lap and looked forward. "I've been in salvage for 8 years, he said quietly. "Half of that in contested sectors. This is not the first time I've been in a room full of people hoping I make an error." "No," she agreed, "but the stakes were different." "Were they?" he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "No, you are right, they were not." She paused. "That is part of why I chose you." The woman in the Earth delegation section had stopped making notes. She was looking at them now, the 2 of them in low conversation, and her expression had moved from professional displeasure to something sharper. Cole made a mental note to find out who she was before the day's formal events ended. The ceremony concluded with the 3rd and final tone, which was longer than the previous 2 and dropped in pitch partway through, resonating in the crystal dome until the air itself seemed to be vibrating at a frequency slightly below hearing. Every Vahari in the room placed a hand over the center of their chest. Some of the human diplomats, having clearly read the briefing materials, did the same. Cole, without thinking, did it too. Sarah noticed. She said nothing, but something in her posture changed in a way that was too small to name but not too small to register. The hall began to move. Formal positions dissolved into the natural clustering of post-ceremony conversation. Vahari nobles moved with purpose, greeting, consulting, avoiding, the complex choreography of political society in motion. The human delegation gathered itself in the way human groups did, shoulder to shoulder, orienting toward familiarity. Cole stood. Lord Keth appeared at Sarah's left side within seconds, which confirmed that he had been watching throughout. Lady Keth was a step behind him. "Well conducted," Lord Keth said, which Cole understood was not directed at the ceremony. "I had a good translator," Cole said. Lady Keth's expression did something small and precise that might have been the beginning of approval. "The reception follows in the East Hall," she said. "You will be presented formally. Are you ready?" Cole thought about what ready meant in this context. A reception. Formal presentation. A room full of Vahari nobility and human diplomats, all now informed of what had happened in the opening ceremony. Verath in amber house colors. The woman from the diplomatic corps with her tablet and her notes. "I have a question first," he said. Lady Keth looked at him. "Yes." The woman in the Earth delegation. Third row, diplomatic corps, gray and blue uniform. She was taking notes on us the entire ceremony. Lord Keth and Lady Keth exchanged the wordless communication of two people who share long history. Then Lord Keth said, "Her name is Director Colette Marsh. She is the senior diplomatic corps liaison assigned to this summit." She had expectations regarding the Keth companion designation that have now been significantly altered. "She had someone in mind," Cole said. "She had approved a candidate," Lord Keth said. "It was to have been a diplomatic arrangement with economic implications for the new trade treaty. Sarah's choice complicates this." Cole looked at Sarah. "You knew about the diplomatic arrangement?" "Yes," she said. "And you did it anyway?" "Yes," she said. "I chose based on what I believed was right, not based on what was politically convenient." Cole stood with that for a moment. In the background, the hall was redistributing itself toward the east wing. "All right," he said. "Lead the way to the reception." He fell into step beside Sarah, with Lord and Lady Keth a half step behind, and he was aware, in the specific way that his years in contested sectors had trained him to be aware, of every set of eyes in the room tracking the four of them as they moved. There was a problem to solve here, several probably. He had solved problems with less preparation before. The East Hall was smaller than the ceremony hall, which still meant it was enormous by any standard Cole had grown up with. The ceiling was lower, which made the space feel more intimate without actually being intimate, and the amber crystal was replaced with something darker and deeper, a blue-black stone in the walls that seemed to absorb light and give back a faint internal glow. The effect was striking, like standing inside a very large, very still body of deep water. The reception was already in progress when they arrived. Attendants were moving through the crowd with trays of food and drink from both cultures, a deliberate choice that Cole noted with appreciation. Someone had done the work to make this feel like common ground. They had been in the room for less than 4 minutes when Director Marsh found them. She was efficient about it. Crossed the room with the directional certainty of someone who had already planned the route, intercepted them near the left wall, and presented herself with a practiced diplomatic smile that did not reach her eyes. "Sarah," she said, in the familiar address that indicated they had met before. Then she looked at Cole. "Lieutenant Harris." "Director Marsh," Cole said. Her smile adjusted itself slightly. "You've been briefed on who I am." "Someone was kind enough to provide context," Cole said. "I'd like to speak with you," she said, briefly, "about the practical implications of today's events." "Of course," Cole said. He glanced at Sarah, who gave the smallest possible nod, which he interpreted as approval for the conversation and the reminder that he did not require her permission. Marsh led him 4 steps away, which was a distance that was technically private but practically visible to everyone in their vicinity. "I want to be direct," she said. "Please," he said. Today's ceremony created a complication for the trade treaty negotiations. The companion designation carries political weight with several of the conclave houses. There was an arrangement in place that would have satisfied specific Vahari concerns about the human delegation's commitment to the alliance framework. That arrangement is now changed. "What do you need from me?" Cole asked. Marsh blinked. She had clearly prepared for several possible responses, and this was not among them. "I need you to understand," she said carefully, "that your position here has implications beyond a personal designation." "I understand that," he said. "What do you need from me specifically?" Another pause. "Consistency," she said finally, "and discretion. And an awareness that the Vahari will be drawing conclusions about Earth's diplomatic posture based on every choice you make." "That was already true before I came to this summit," Cole said. "It was true the day I graduated from the academy, Every time any of us is in a room with them, they're drawing conclusions. He met her eyes. I've read the briefing materials, Director. I know what's at stake. I didn't choose this situation, but I'm in it, and I intend to conduct myself appropriately. Marsh was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're not what I expected." "I get that a lot today," Cole said. Something in her expression shifted, not to warmth, but to something that was less like opposition. "I would like a formal briefing with you tomorrow morning," she said. "Before the first negotiation session, 7 o'clock Eastern Hall anteroom." "I'll be there," he said. She nodded, composed herself, and withdrew with the same efficiency she had arrived with. Cole turned back to find Sarah a few feet away, looking at him with the expression that he was beginning to identify as her version of quiet interest. 7 o'clock, he said. "I hope Vahari Prime mornings are similar to Earth mornings." "Dawn is at 6:42, she said. "You will have time." Lord Keth appeared beside them. "Varath has requested an introduction," he said. "He is across the room. Do not let him choose the moment. We should go to him." Cole looked across the room. Varath was standing near a cluster of Amber House attendants, watching them without looking like he was watching them, which was a skill Cole could respect even from someone he expected to be trouble. "Walk with me," Lord Keth said to Cole. Cole walked with him. The introduction was formal and brief, and conducted in standard. Varath was younger than Cole had estimated, probably mid-20s in human terms, with the contained, coiled quality of someone who was very good at not showing what he was thinking. He spoke to Cole with precise courtesy, said nothing that was inappropriate, and communicated, entirely through posture and the careful absence of certain social gestures, that Cole was an unexpected variable in a calculation he had been confident in, and that he was already working on a new approach. Cole thanked him for the introduction. He meant it. He wanted to know what he was dealing with, and Varath had just confirmed several things. Walking back to Sarah, Lord Keth said quietly, "You handled that well." "I've met people like him before," Cole said. "In salvage," Lord Keth said. "In salvage," Cole said, "you go into contested sectors, you run into every type. People who think you're in their space, people who think you owe them something, people who are just trying to calculate their advantage. You learn to read them fast." Lord Keth was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My daughter chose you because of the cable." "I know," Cole said. "But she also chose you because of everything that came after." Cole looked at him. "She has read every action report you filed in 8 years, Lord Keth said. "Every incident report, every commendation and every reprimand. She knows your service record better than your commanding officer does." Cole thought about this. 4 months ago, when the summit invitation list was finalized, she had read his file. She had written the briefing sections on kinship traditions. She had been preparing for this. "She is thorough," Cole said. "She is," Lord Keth agreed, and this time the pride in it was not disguised at all. They rejoined Sarah. Lady Keth was beside her, speaking with 2 other Vahari nobles. Sarah met Cole's eyes across the distance and asked, without speaking, how it had gone. Cole gave her the smallest nod he could manage. She looked at the twin moons rising now through the high windows of the East Hall and said nothing, but her shoulders settled in a way that he thought might mean relief. The night was long, the conversations were complex. The food was strange and the drink was stranger, and by the time the reception formally ended, Cole's feet ached and his jaw was tired from sustained diplomatic composure, and he had had 3 more notable conversations, and added 2 more people to his mental file of concerns. But he was still standing. He had not broken any protocols he knew about. He had not said anything that Director Marsh would need to brief against in the morning. He counted it as a reasonable first day. Sarah walked him to the human delegation quarters at the end of the evening, with 2 of her house attendants at a respectful distance behind them. The corridor was long and lit with the same internal glow as the East Hall walls, and their footsteps were quiet on the dark stone. At the door to the human guest wing, she stopped. "You did well today," she said. "Your bar might be low," he said. "It is not," she said. He believed her. 7 o'clock tomorrow, he said. "I will be at the anteroom at 6:55, she said. "You will not meet Director Marsh without someone who understands the treaty framework." He had not asked her to come. She had decided, and she was informing him. He found he did not mind. "All right," he said. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, Cole Harris," she said. He went inside. He sat on the edge of the bed provided in the human quarters, which was firmer than he would have chosen but otherwise fine, and he looked at his hands for a moment, the hands that had once held a tow cable rated for 4,000 kilograms, and decided the margin of error was acceptable. He was in a situation that had no margin of error visible from any angle he could currently find. He decided to find one. He lay down, set a mental alarm for 6:15, and was asleep in under 4 minutes. The twin moons of Vahari Prime moved through the violet sky outside the window. The summit had 2 more weeks to run. He had work to do. By the 3rd morning, Cole had developed a rhythm, which was the thing he always did when he was in a situation that was going to last. You find the pattern. You build the routine. Routine is the frame that holds everything else together when everything else is trying to come apart. He was up at 6. At 6:40, he was in the corridor outside the anteroom, and Sarah was already there, as she had promised, with a small document case and the composed readiness of someone who had slept 6 hours and used every one of them. Director Marsh arrived at 2 minutes past 7 and found them both waiting, which she had not expected. She adapted quickly. Whatever she had intended for a one-on-one with Cole shifted into a 3-way briefing that was, Cole judged, more productive than the original version would have been. Marsh knew the treaty framework completely. Sarah knew the Vahari political landscape completely. Cole knew how to listen to 2 people who had different maps of the same territory and identify where the maps agreed and where they diverged, and ask questions in the divergent places. By the end of the briefing, Marsh was writing notes that were not about Cole. They were about the treaty clauses. "The dilithium access clause," she said, reviewing her notes. "If House Ambar has been positioning that as leverage, then the original companion arrangement was about more than status alignment. It was about the mining survey rights in the outer systems," Sarah said. "House Ambar controls the access routes. A closer tie between Ambar and Keth would have given the delegation access to those routes through us. The companion arrangement was the mechanism. And now that's not available," Marsh said. "Now it is not the mechanism," Sarah said. "The access could still be available, through a different approach." Marsh looked at her. "What approach?" "House Keth has its own relationships with the outer system communities," Sarah said. "They predate House Ambar's route control by 2 generations. We do not use them often because it has not been necessary." She paused. "It may now be necessary." Marsh was quiet for a long moment. Cole watched her work through the implications and arrive at the conclusion. "You're offering to open the House Keth routes," Marsh said. "I am suggesting it is possible," Sarah said, "with appropriate frameworks." Marsh looked at Cole. Cole was not sure why. "What?" he said. "You told me in the reception that every time any of us is in a room with them, they're drawing conclusions," Marsh said. "You were right. And right now the Keth House is drawing conclusions about us based on this conversation." "The conclusions are favorable," Sarah said, in a tone that was perfectly neutral. The corners of Marsh's mouth moved. "Fine," she said, "let's talk frameworks." That afternoon was the first formal negotiation session, and Cole was present in the observer section with Sarah's house documentation as his nominal credential, which was thin as a basis for attendance, but which no one challenged because no one wanted to be the one to argue with House Keth's companion designation. He was useful in ways he had not anticipated. His salvage work had taken him through the outer systems multiple times, and twice during the session, he was able to provide root information from operational memory that neither the treaty team nor Sarah had in their documentation. The second time, a Vahari negotiator who had been quietly resistant to a particular clause looked at him with an expression that recalibrated and said, in careful standard, "You have traveled the Yeth corridor." 3 times, Cole said. The second time with a disabled beacon, which is why I know the secondary channel exists. The Vahari negotiator was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "This information is useful." "Happy to help," Cole said. Sarah, beside him, did not say anything, but her shoulder moved in a way he was learning to read as satisfaction. On the 4th day, Varath made his move. It was not dramatic. Varath did not seem like a dramatic person. He was methodical, which was more dangerous. The move was a formal challenge to the companion designation, filed through conclave protocols, and presented at the morning convening with the specific language that indicated Cole had been selected without full adherence to a particular Vahari tradition regarding companion eligibility requirements for noble house representatives. Cole did not fully understand the challenge when it was presented. Sarah explained it in the corridor afterward in a low, even voice. "The tradition he is invoking," she said, "requires that a companion to a high house representative demonstrate what translates approximately as proven worth in adversity. It is an old requirement from before the conclave unified. It was never formally removed." "Has it been invoked before?" Cole asked. 3 times, she said, in the last 100 years, twice successfully. "And the third?" "The third," she said, "the challenger withdrew, because the companion demonstrated the worth before the formal review could convene." Cole leaned against the corridor wall. "What does demonstrated worth look like?" "It varies," she said. "It is assessed by a panel of 3 conclave elders. They review the record. They may also request a demonstration." "What kind of demonstration?" She was quiet for a moment. In the old tradition it was a trial, usually physical, navigation, survival, a constructed challenge. In the new tradition, "It depends on what the elders request," she said. "They have discretion." Cole looked at the ceiling. The internal glow of the walls pulsed once. "All right," he said. "When does this get decided?" "The panel convenes in 2 days," she said. "If you are found to lack the required worth, the companion designation is formally dissolved. And Varath steps in. It would be offered to the most appropriate alternative," she said carefully. "Varath," Cole said. "A pause, most likely," she said. He looked at her. She was looking back at him with the same composed attention she had offered from the beginning, and underneath it, very quiet, was something that was not quite fear but was in the same family. He had not seen that from her before. "I'm not going to fail the panel," he said. "I know," she said, and she said it the way she said everything, as if it were simply true. On the 5th day, Director Marsh called Cole into a private meeting and told him that the diplomatic core position was that the companion challenge was, while inconvenient, technically within Vahari protocols, and that the delegation would support Cole through the process but could not directly intervene. "I understand," Cole said. "I want you to know," Marsh said, and she paused in a way that was unlike her, "that the treaty team has noted the contributions you've made in the first 3 sessions. The outer system root information, the secondary channel, those were not minor." "Thank you," he said. "And," she said, and paused again, "Sarah Valandris Keth has been an extraordinarily effective partner in these negotiations. More effective than the original companion arrangement would have allowed, based on what I now understand about House Ambar's interests." "Yes," Cole said. "I'm saying," Marsh said, with the careful precision of someone choosing the most accurate words, that whatever she thought when she made that designation, it was not politically stupid. No, Cole said, it was not. Marsh nodded. 7 o'clock tomorrow. We need to discuss the outer system route frameworks before the panel convenes. I'll be there, he said. The 6th day was the panel convening. 3 conclave elders, a formal chamber with walls of the same dark blue-black stone lit from within. Sarah was permitted to attend. Lord and Lady Keth sat in the observer section. Verath was also present, seated at a distance, with the patient stillness of someone who believed the outcome was already determined. Cole stood before the panel in his dress uniform, and the elder in the center, whose title translated roughly as archive keeper, looked at him with eyes that had been accumulating observations for a very long time. The challenge claims, the archive keeper said, in formal standard, that you have not demonstrated proven worth in adversity sufficient to the Keth companion designation. I understand the claim, Cole said. We have reviewed your service record, the archive keeper said. 8 years in Earth salvage and rescue, 43 documented operations, 11 in contested space. The incident involving the Keth-7 probe is among these but not the only incident of note. The elder paused. We have questions. Ask them, Cole said. The questions were thorough. They covered specific operational details. They asked about decisions made, resources available, the calculations underlying specific choices. Cole answered each one with the specific, accurate language of someone who had done the work and retained the details. Because the details were the job. Because in salvage the details were what stood between the situation and the outcome you could live with. At one point the elder on the left, whose title was something that translated as deep record, asked, in your 43 operations, how many resulted in the full recovery of the target? 38 full recoveries, Cole said, 4 partial recoveries, 1 total loss. The total loss, the elder said, tell us about it. Cole was quiet for a moment. It was a cargo freighter in the Yeth corridor, small crew, 7 people. The structural failure was further along than the initial distress signal indicated. By the time we arrived, there was not enough of the vessel remaining to recover. We recovered 3 of the 7 crew members. How did you select which 3? I didn't, Cole said. I went for the nearest distress beacon and kept going until the ship broke up completely. I didn't select. I kept reaching until I couldn't reach anymore. The chamber was very quiet. And then, the archive keeper asked. And then I wrote the incident report, Cole said, and I went back to work because there were other distress calls in the queue. The panel was quiet for a long moment. Verath, in the observer section, had stopped looking patient. The archive keeper looked at Cole for a long time. Then she said, the challenge is reviewed. The panel will deliberate. The deliberation took 11 minutes. Cole stood in the corridor with Sarah while it happened. She did not speak. He did not speak. The walls glowed. The door opened. The challenge is dismissed, the archive keeper said. The companion designation stands. Cole breathed once slowly. Sarah said nothing, but when they turned to walk back toward the main hall, she walked close enough that their shoulders were almost touching, and for the first time since the gallery above the ceremony hall, he understood that the composed attention she showed him was not detachment. It was something much closer. He filed it away carefully, the way he filed all important information. The 3rd week of the summit would require the same care as the first, maybe more. He kept walking, she kept pace. The hour after the panel dismissal was unusual. Cole had expected debriefing, meetings, the organizational machinery of a diplomatic summit reasserting itself around an event that had now resolved. Instead, Sarah took him to a part of the diplomatic complex he had not been to before, a long lower corridor that opened into a garden that was not like the courtyard at the building's center. This one was smaller, enclosed on 3 sides by dark stone walls and on the 4th by a glass panel that looked out onto Vahari Prime's surface. And through it, you could see the outer system's first stars beginning to appear in the violet sky, as the day moved toward its long evening. "Sit," she said. He sat on a bench that was lower to the ground than human furniture and more comfortable than he expected. She sat beside him, and they looked at the stars coming out, and she said nothing for a while. Neither did he. He had found over the years that the people worth knowing were the ones who understood that silence was not empty. It was where the important things lived when words had not yet been chosen. After perhaps 5 minutes, she said, "You told the panel about the freighter in the Yeth corridor." "They asked," he said. "You did not have to tell them about the 4 people you did not recover." "That would have been deceptive," he said. "They were asking about my record. My record includes that." She was quiet again for a moment. Verath would not have told them about the failures. "I know," Cole said. "That is why he is not sitting here," she said. Cole turned to look at her. She was still looking at the stars, which were multiplying now, the violet deepening toward the dark. The glass panel made the view perfectly clear, no distortion, and the stars on Vahari Prime were brighter and more numerous than they looked from Earth's surface, because the atmosphere was thinner at the elevation of the complex. "Tell me something," he said, using her own phrasing from what felt like a long time ago now, though it had been less than a week. She turned to look at him. "Yes," she said. "When you were preparing for this summit," he said. "When you were reading my file, writing the briefing sections, planning the companion designation. Did you talk to anyone else about it?" She considered this with the careful thoughtfulness she applied to everything. "I spoke with my mother," she said. "What did she say?" "She said that choosing a human would be complicated," she said. "She said the complications would be real and significant and should not be minimized. And then she said that if I had thought about it as carefully as she believed I had, and if I was choosing based on genuine judgment rather than novelty, then she would support the choice." Sarah paused. "My mother does not say things she does not mean." "I've noticed," Cole said. "What about your father?" "My father said that the Keth 7 probe was in his personal observatory records as a recovered artifact," she said. "He said that, when he looked at the recovery log from 11 years ago, the calculation someone had done with that cable was the kind of calculation that either came from recklessness or from a very precise understanding of tolerance limits, and that the distinction between those two things was the most important question." Cole was quiet. "He spent 3 days reviewing your subsequent service record," she said. "Then he told me that the answer was clear." "Which answer?" "That you understood tolerance limits," she said, "and that this was rarer than it looked." Above them, the stars continued to multiply. Vahari Prime had no major light pollution at this elevation, and the outer systems were starting to come clear, the arm of the galaxy spreading across the glass panel in a way that Cole had only ever seen from space before. "Thessa Verath Selvi," he said. Sarah's posture did not change, but something in it became more alert, like a system that has been in standby coming fully online. "Yes," she said. "She is not done," he said. "No," Sarah said, "she is not." Verath filed the challenge. The challenge was dismissed, but Thessa is the strategic one, which means the challenge was always her plan, not his, and now she is evaluating what to do with the information she got from watching me answer the panel. Sarah looked at him with the silver eyes and the dark ring. "The information she got," Cole said, "is that I am not going to be rattled by formal process, and I am not going to shade my answers in self-serving directions, and I have 11 years of operational record that the panel found satisfactory." He paused. "So her next approach will not be through the conclave protocols." "No," Sarah said, "it will not. She will try something more personal," he said. "Something that does not go through formal channels, something that makes me look unsuitable without putting the challenge in writing." "That is my assessment as well," she said. He nodded. "All right. What does that look like in Vahari political terms?" She told him. It took 20 minutes, because the answer was detailed and specific, and she had clearly already thought through most of the contingencies. Cole listened with the full attention he gave to pre-mission briefings, building the map in his head, noting the intersections and the gaps. When she finished, he said, "You have been thinking about this since before the challenge was filed." "Since the reception on the first night," she said, "when I identified Thessa in the observer section." "You knew she was there." "I knew she would attend," Sarah said. "She always travels with her brother to events of significance to House Ambar. I simply did not know which angle she would choose first." Cole leaned back against the bench and looked at the stars and thought about Thessa Selvi, whom he had yet to speak to directly, and who was almost certainly at this moment sitting in a very comfortable room somewhere in this complex, and thinking about him with the same patient strategic intelligence. "She is good at this," Cole said. "She is very good at this," Sarah confirmed. "So are you." A pause. "Yes," she said, "I am." He turned to look at her. She was looking at the stars again, her profile lit by the faint glow from the complex walls, and he thought about the 4 months of preparation, the file she had read, the briefing sections she had written, the summit she had been attending since before she was old enough to be named a representative. "You have been preparing for something like this for a long time," he said. "I have been preparing for this summit for a long time," she said precisely. "The specific shape of it I could not have predicted." "But you prepared for the possibility of choosing someone," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "I prepared for the possibility of choosing well," she said. "Whether the choice would present itself or not was outside my control." "And then I was on the list," he said. "And then you were on the list," she agreed. The stars had fully come out now, the violet sky gone completely dark, and Vahari Prime's outer system was spread across the glass panel in a clarity that Cole had only ever seen from the inside of a spacecraft before. He could pick out the star his ship had come from, or close enough to it, a point of light indistinguishable from the others unless you knew where to look. He knew where to look. "Thessa will make her move in the next 2 days," he said, "before the signing." "Yes," Sarah said, "that is the window." "When she does," he said, "I want you to let me handle the initial contact." She turned to look at him. "Why?" "Because she is watching for how I respond to things," he said. "And the most useful information she is going to get is that I can see what she is doing and I am not afraid of it." He paused. "The best way to communicate that is directly." Sarah looked at him for a long moment with the silver eyes and the careful attention. "You have done this before," she said. "Similar versions of it," he said. "In contested sectors, you sometimes meet people who are testing your limits. The most efficient response is to demonstrate the limits are further than they expect." "And if her move is not something that can be handled directly," she said. "Then I adjust," he said, "but I start direct." She nodded. It was not the nod of someone conceding the argument. It was the nod of someone who had reached the same conclusion from a different direction, and was confirming the alignment. "All right," she said. They sat in the lower garden for another quarter hour, in the silence that was not empty, watching the stars through the glass, and then the complex chimed its evening signal and they went back inside, and the 3rd week began. He kept walking, she kept pace. Above Vahari Prime, the twin moons were up again, bright in the violet afternoon sky, moving slowly through their shared orbit the way they had for 1 billion years before any of them were born. The last 3 days of the summit moved with the specific speed of something that is finally in motion after a long resistance, like a system that had been building pressure and had finally found its channel. Thessa Selvi made her move on the first of those 3 days, which was earlier than Cole had expected and later than Sarah had. She approached him in the morning before the final negotiation session, in the corridor outside the main conference hall, alone, which told Cole 2 things immediately. She had chosen the timing carefully, when Sarah was in a pre-session briefing with her parents, and she had chosen to come without support, which was its own kind of signal. She was taller than her brother and quieter in the way she carried herself. She stopped a comfortable distance from Cole, which was a choice, and looked at him with the analytical expression he had noted at the opening ceremony. "Lieutenant Harris," she said, in standard that was more natural than Verath's, less formal, like someone who had actually used it outside of official settings. "Thessa Verath Selvi," he said. A pause. She had not expected him to use her full name. "You know who I am." "I identified you the first night," he said. "You were in the observer section, amber and silver house colors." "You are observant," she said. "I work in contested sectors," he said. "You learn to be." She looked at him with the analytical attention for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to be direct with you." "I prefer it," he said. "House Ambar's position in the outer systems is long-standing," she said. "The relationships we have with the communities in those corridors are older than the current treaty framework. What has been discussed in the negotiation sessions regarding House Keth's alternative routes assumes a level of cooperation from those communities that is not guaranteed." Cole looked at her. "You are telling me that the Keth routes may not be as clear as the negotiation team believes." "I am telling you," she said, "that there are relationships involved that a briefing document cannot fully capture." "And you are telling me this because," he said. She was quiet for a moment. The analytical expression had not changed, but something behind it had shifted. "Because," she said, "if the outer system route framework is built on an assumption that proves incorrect, it will damage the treaty, and the treaty matters." She paused again. "Whatever else is true about the current situation." Cole considered this carefully. He had been prepared for something designed to undermine him or Sarah or the companion designation. This was not that. Or if it was doing it in the most sophisticated way he could imagine, by being genuinely useful. "The communities in the Yeth corridor," he said. "I've been through those routes. The secondary channel I mentioned in the negotiation session goes through a settlement called the Keth Outer Station." She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "The station was Keth founded," he said, 2 generations back. "But the community has been self-governing for 60 years. 58, she said. "Which means the House Keth relationship is historical," he said, "not current." "Yes," she said. "And House Ambar has a current relationship. House Ambar has invested in the station's infrastructure for 20 years, she said. "The community is not unfriendly to House Keth, but they will not simply redirect access because a treaty says to." Cole stood with this for a moment. "Does Sarah know this?" "I believe she does," Thessa said, "but I am not certain she has communicated it fully to your treaty team." Cole nodded. "Why are you telling me?" She looked at him with a precision that he thought was probably as close to direct honesty as she could get in this setting. "Because I looked at your panel hearing," she said. "You told the elders about the 4 people in the Yeth corridor that you did not recover. You did not have to do that." "No," he said. "Someone who tells that story to a panel that has the authority to revoke his designation is not someone who will build the treaty on a comfortable lie," she said. "The treaty matters more than House Ambar's position at this particular summit." It was, Cole thought, one of the most honest things anyone had said to him since he arrived on Vahari Prime. "I'll make sure the treaty team has the full picture on the community relationships," he said. "That would be useful," she said. He looked at her. "Is there a formal channel for House Ambar to provide documentation on the outer system community relationships? On record, not just in conversation?" She was quiet. Then she said, "There is a conclave documentation protocol for exactly that purpose." "File it," he said. "If House Ambar's relationships with those communities are real and 20 years deep, put them in the record. That helps the treaty, not hurts it. A framework built on accurate maps holds. One built on incomplete maps breaks." She looked at him for a long moment. "You are not what House Ambar expected," she said. "I get that a lot," he said. She inclined her head, which the briefing materials had described as a formal acknowledgement of a point well made. "I will consider what you have said," she said. "Consider it quickly," he said. "The signing is tomorrow." She was quiet for one beat, then something at the edge of her expression moved, something that was not quite a smile but was in the same direction. "I will act on it today," she said. She walked away. Cole watched her go, and then he turned around and found Sarah standing at the far end of the corridor, and from the look on her face she had arrived in time to catch at least the last exchange. He walked to her. "The Keth Outer Station," he said, "58 years of self-governance." She met his eyes. "Yes," she said. "You knew House Ambar had the current relationship." "I knew there was a complexity," she said. "I had intended to brief it before the final negotiation session." "Thessa got there first," he said, "on purpose." "Yes," Sarah said, "she would. She is going to file the documentation through conclave protocols," he said. "It will be in the record by this afternoon." Sarah was quiet for a moment, working through implications. "That changes the outer system framework from a binary alternative to a cooperative model," she said. "Which is more accurate and more stable," he said. "And," she said, "it requires House Ambar to be a named partner in the framework." "Which is what they wanted from the beginning," Cole said, "just through a different mechanism." She looked at him. "You gave Thessa an exit from the position her brother put them in." "She gave herself the exit," he said. "She just needed someone to confirm the door was real." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "My mother said you understood tolerance limits." "Your father said that," he said. "My mother agreed with him," she said. They stood in the corridor as other summit attendees moved past them in both directions, the morning traffic of the final full day, and Cole felt the particular quality of a situation that has just resolved one layer to reveal the next, the way a salvage job always had another problem waiting underneath the one you had just solved. But underneath this one, he thought, was not another problem. Underneath this one was the signing and the courtyard and the question of what came after. The outer system root framework came together on the morning of the final full negotiation day, with Director Marsh leading on the human side, and a Vahari trade minister named Avik on the conclave side, and Sarah sitting 2 seats from Cole at the table with her documents open and her attention absolute. The House Keth root network was formalized as a secondary access corridor for the treaty framework, and House Ambar's community relationships in the outer systems were formalized as the implementation layer, which meant the framework had 2 moving parts that were designed to work together rather than one that was supposed to replace the other. Thessa's documentation had been filed by 9 that morning. Director Marsh had read it by 9:30. At 10, she had called Cole into a brief side conversation and said simply, "How did you do that?" "I just told the truth," Cole said, "about what the map needed to show." Marsh looked at him for a moment. "You are not what I expected," she said, for the second time since the summit began. "I know," he said. Verath was not in the room. Cole had noted his absence at 8 that morning and not been surprised. House Ambar would adjust. Verath would adjust. Cole had been around enough contested sector operators to know that people like Verath did not stop, they redirected. Thessa had already begun the redirect. It would bear watching. But that was a problem for after the summit, and there were people better positioned than a salvage lieutenant to handle it. The treaty session concluded at midday. The formal signing was scheduled for the following morning. In the afternoon, with no scheduled events for the first time since arrival, Cole found himself on the gallery above the ceremony hall, looking out through the amber crystal at the twin moons, which were in the western sky now and lower than they had been the first night. The ceremony hall was empty below. The event staff were preparing it for tomorrow's signing, moving with quiet efficiency through the amber light. He heard her before he saw her. Not her footsteps, which were quiet the way all Vahari footsteps were quiet, but the change in air pressure that he had noticed when she moved, the way the space arranged itself differently around her. "You found the gallery," she said. "It seemed like the right place," he said. She stood beside him at the railing, and they looked at the hall below and the sky above. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," he agreed. The day after tomorrow, the Earth delegation would begin the transit back to the jump point, and the summit would be formally complete. Cole would file his report, Colonel Drayson would read it and probably not believe it, and the world would proceed. "What happens after?" he said. She was quiet for a moment. "After the summit, the companion designation formally concludes," she said. "It was for the summit proceedings." "I know," he said. "It does not have to be the conclusion of everything," she said carefully. He looked at her. She was looking at the amber crystal ceiling. "That would be more complicated," he said. "Yes," she said. "Different species, different systems, different everything." "Yes," she said. "The briefing materials," he said slowly. "The kinship traditions section, the one you wrote." "Yes," she said, and there was something in the word that was waiting. "That section," he said, "covered interspecies relationships in some detail." "There has been precedent," she said. "In the years since first contact, not common, but it has happened." "It is complicated," he said, using her word back at her. "It is," she said, "but I did not choose you because it was simple." Cole looked at the hall below, where the attendants were moving tables and arranging the signing platform. Then he looked up at the amber crystal and the twin moons faint beyond it. 8 years in salvage had taught him one thing above all others. You do not let the calculation stop you from reaching. You calculate the margin of error, you assess the situation honestly, and then you decide if you are going to act. And if you are going to act, you act with everything you have. "Tell me something," he said. "Yes," she said. "When you wrote that kinship traditions section, when you read my file, when you chose me in that gallery and pointed at me in front of your parents and 400 witnesses," he paused. "Did you already know what you were hoping for after the summit?" She was quiet for a long moment. The amber light moved through the crystal above them, shifting slowly with the position of the sun. "I knew what I hoped," she said finally. "I did not know if you would choose the same." "You took a considerable risk," he said. "I calculated the margin of error," she said, and at the edge of those words was something he had not heard from her before, something quiet and warm and human in the most species-independent sense of the word. He smiled, he could not help it. "The cable held," he said. She looked at him. Her silver eyes, with the dark ring around the iris, caught the amber light and held it, and he understood that whatever he saw there was something she had not shown to very many people. "The cable held," she agreed. Below them, the signing platform was almost complete. Tomorrow's ceremony would be different from the opening one, shorter and more specific, but with its own weight. The treaty that emerged from this summit would shape the relationship between Earth and the Vahari conclave for the next generation. Cole Harris, salvage lieutenant, had sat in rooms where that treaty was built, had contributed to it in ways that would not appear in any public record, and would attend the signing tomorrow as companion to the woman who had changed the political and personal map of his life in the time it took a tone to ring through an amber dome. He thought about the conversation he was going to need to have with Colonel Drayson. He thought about what a posting to Vahari space might look like, if there were such a thing, if the treaty framework opened the access routes the way everyone in that negotiation room had worked toward. He thought about the secondary channel in the Yeth corridor, and how different it looked from the inside of a salvage tug versus the inside of a formal treaty session. He thought about margins of error. "There's a lot to figure out," he said. "There is," she said, "but I have found that things that are worth figuring out are usually possible to figure out, if both sides apply themselves." "I have been told," he said, "that I am reasonably good at applying myself." "Your service record confirms it," she said. "You know the service record better than my commanding officer," he said. Yes, she said, I do. He looked at her. She looked back at him. The amber light continued its slow shift through the crystal dome, and the twin moons were lower now, nearly at the horizon, completing another circuit of a path they had traveled for longer than any record kept. Sarah, he said. Yes, she said. After the signing tomorrow, he said, before the delegation boards for transit, I would like to have a real conversation, not diplomatic, not formal, not protocol governed. What kind, she said. The kind, he said, where we figure out what comes next. She looked at the moons going down, and the amber light coming through the crystal, and the hall below where tomorrow's history was being laid out. I would like that, she said. Good, he said. They stood there for a few more minutes in the quiet of the empty gallery, with the summit winding down below them and whatever came after still ahead. The compound light of Vahari Prime's sun through amber crystal was something he had never seen before and could not have described in technical terms, only in the way it felt to stand in it. Remarkable, that was the word. All of it. The signing the next morning was precise and formal, and carried the weight of 11 years of careful work by a lot of people who had believed in what they were building. When Cole's name was called as part of the witness roster for the companion designation's contribution to the outer system framework, he stood and was acknowledged and sat back down. He caught Director Marsh's eye across the room. She gave him a nod that was not quite warmth, but was as close as she got. He gave one back. He caught Thessa Varath-Selvi's eye in the observer section. She gave him the formal Vahari acknowledgement of a point well made. He returned it, imperfectly but recognizably, and something in her expression adjusted with the specific quality of someone who has decided to revise their estimate upward. Afterward, in the corridor outside the signing chamber, with the delegation preparing for transit and the Vahari beginning the post-summit courtesies, Sarah found him. You have 40 minutes, she said, before your departure convoy forms. I know, he said, walk with me. She walked with him. They went to the courtyard at the center of the Vahari diplomatic complex, which was open to the sky and planted with something that was not trees but served the same purpose, tall and still and catching the light. It was quiet there. Just the two of them and the sound of whatever passed for birds on Vahari Prime, high and clear and not quite melodic but close. They talked for 38 minutes. It was, as he had said, not diplomatic, not formal, not protocol governed. It was two people with different maps trying to see if the maps could be combined into something that covered the same territory. There were complications. He had known there would be. She had not pretended there would not be, but complications were not conclusions. A cable rated for 4,000 kilograms and an object massing 6,200 were a complication. The outcome depended on what you did with the margin. At 38 minutes, his communicator signaled the convoy assembly. He looked at her. I'll file a request, he said, for an exchange posting. Earth Salvage has a liaison program with allied species now. It has never been used for the Vahari, but there is no reason it cannot be. I will speak to my father about a House Keth sponsorship for the posting, she said, which will move it through conclave channels faster than a standard diplomatic application. You have already thought about this, he said. 4 months ago, she said, when I read your file. He shook his head, not in frustration, in something closer to wonder. How did you know, he said, that I would be worth all of this? She looked at him with the silver eyes and the dark ring and the composed attention that was not. He understood now completely, detachment at all. You calculated the margin, she said, and you reached anyway. He stood in the courtyard, with the not-quite trees moving slowly in the wind and the open sky of Vahari Prime above him, and the convoy signal on his communicator, and he understood that some decisions do not require more calculation than the one you have already done. I will see you, he said, on the other side of the application process. I will be waiting, she said. He walked to the convoy. At the gate of the diplomatic complex, he turned once. She was still in the courtyard, standing in the light. He raised his hand. She raised hers. He went through the gate. The transit back to the jump point took 6 hours, and Cole spent most of them at the small porthole in the transport bay, watching Vahari Prime recede. The twin moons were both visible now, in their shared orbit, circling something that held them in the same gravity, each completing the same path in the same time, as if they had agreed on it long before anyone was around to observe the agreement. Colonel Drayson's first question, when Cole filed his after-action report, was going to be, "What exactly did you do at that summit?" Cole was going to need a very long answer. He was already drafting it. The transport crossed the jump threshold, and Vahari Prime disappeared behind the fold of space, and somewhere on the surface, a woman with silver eyes and dark crest marks was already, he was fairly certain, talking to her father about a sponsorship application. He had calculated the margin. He was still reaching. That, as far as he could tell, was the only approach that had ever worked.